It began with a train, a machine of iron, steam, and profound ambition. It ended with a world in ruins, economies shattered, empires dissolved, and the very foundations of the global order shaken to dust. This is not a story of trenches or treaties, but of ledgers and leverage, of how the world's greatest empire, in a ruthless bid to strangle a single, symbolic artery of its rival, triggered a financial avalanche. They aimed to break a nation's will. Instead, they broke the system that had enriched them for a century. To understand how a decision made in the quiet corridors of London City and Whitehall unleashed hunger in Buenos Aires and bankruptcy in Iowa, we must go back to system. A world where money was as powerful a weapon as any army, and where the most devastating war was not fought with bullets, but with bonds. In the long summer of 1914, the world economy was a masterpiece of intricate, fragile connections. It ran on gold, the gold standard. A simple, brutal, elegant system. A nation's currency was a promissory note, redeemable for a fixed amount of the precious metal. It created stability, but also a chain reaction. A shock in one corner of the globe would transmit, through the arteries of trade and credit, to every other. And at the heart of this system sat London, not just the capital of an empire, but the undisputed financial capital of the world. The City of London was the world's bank, its insurer, its commodity trader. It financed Argentine railroads, American cattle ranches, and Malayan rubber plantations. The British pound sterling was not just a currency, it was the lingua franca of global commerce. This financial hegemony was the true source of British power, more than the Royal Navy, more than the armies. It was an empire of credit. But this system had a flaw. It demanded absolute faith. Faith that promises would be kept, that debts would be honored, that the music of lending and borrowing would never stop. Britain's principal rival, Imperial Germany, it understood this. It could not outbuild the Royal Navy overnight, but it could attempt to outflank British finance. Its weapon? Economic integration. And its most audacious project was not a battleship, but a railway. The Berlin-to-Baghdad Railway. More than steel and sleepers, it was a geopolitical spear aimed at the soft underbelly of the British Empire. It promised to connect German industry directly to the resources of the Ottoman Empire, to create a continuous, German-dominated economic sphere from the North Sea to the Persian Gulf, a sphere that would bypass London's financial control. For Britain, this wasn't just a train line. It was a direct challenge to the very system that sustained its global preeminence. When war erupted in August 1914, the battlefield commands were clear. But in London, another, more clandestine war began immediately. The economic war. The goal was simple: cripple Germany's capacity to fight. And the men in charge knew that Germany's industrial machine was fed by imports, nitrates for explosives, metals for shells, oils for lubrication, and most critically, food. Germany was not self-sufficient. The initial tool was the naval blockade. But a battleship could only stop a physical ship. Britain needed to stop the idea of trading with Germany. They needed to attack the credit, the trust, the very confidence that allowed global commerce to function for the Central Powers. So, they invented new rules. They declared that any goods with a potential enemy destination, even if shipped via a neutral country like the Netherlands or Denmark, were liable to seizure. They created a vast blacklist of firms across the globe suspected of trading with Germany. Any company on this list was cut off from the London financial system, unable to get credit, insurance, or use the sterling. It was a financial death sentence, but history rarely moves in straight lines. The first, unintended victim of this financial offensive was Britain itself. The global system froze in panic. The very credit London depended on seized up. The stock exchange closed. The Bank of England struggled. It was a terrifying preview of the chaos to come. By 1915, the British system was refined into a weapon of terrifying precision and scope. The key was control of information. Cable communications from Europe to the Americas passed through British-controlled stations. Every invoice, every shipping manifest, every bank transfer request could be intercepted and analyzed by Room 40, the Admiralty's intelligence hub, and the newly formed Ministry of Blockade. To buy anything from anywhere, a neutral merchant now had to prove to a British consul that his goods would not, could not, end up in German hands. It was guilt until proven innocent. On a global scale, Britain had effectively deputized itself as the judge, jury, and enforcer of world trade. The effect on Germany was brutal and slow-acting, like a financial siege. The value of its currency collapsed on neutral markets. It could not pay for imports except with its dwindling gold reserves, which Britain also worked to block. The blockade bit deepest where it mattered most, the stomach of the nation. Shortages led to rationing, rationing to malnutrition, malnutrition to social unrest, and ultimately to the collapse of civilian morale. The British strategy was working. The train to Baghdad was going nowhere. Germany was being slowly suffocated. But beneath the surface, something else was happening. The British financial weapon was creating monstrous, distorting pressures across the entire global economic organism. The war created artificial, feverish demand. Wheat from the prairies, beef from the pampas, copper from Chile, jute from Bengal, all flowed towards the Allies, financed by London and, increasingly, by New York. Entire economies, from Argentina to New Zealand, reconfigured themselves to feed the British war machine. They took out massive loans, expanded production wildly, believing the boom would last forever. Then, in November 1918, the guns fell silent. The demand vanished overnight. Britain, victorious but drowning in its own war debt, immediately did two things. First, it tightened the blockade, maintaining it for 8 months after the armistice, to force Germany to sign the Treaty of Versailles. This prolonged the strangulation of Central Europe, a market the world desperately needed to absorb its surplus goods. Second, it began to call in its loans and slash its purchases to rebuild its own shattered finances. The result was a chain reaction of economic collapse. With no buyers in Europe, the price of global commodities, wheat, wool, coffee, rubber, plummeted. Overnight, the producers from the Dominions and Latin America were bankrupt. They defaulted on their loans. The banks that lent to them, many in London and now in New York, faced ruin. Credit contracted violently. Factories closed. Unemployment soared. The financial flu, incubated in the war rooms of London, had now become a global pandemic. The Great Depression did not begin in 1929 on Wall Street. Its seeds were sown in the years immediately after 1918, in the wreckage of the global system Britain had weaponized. The desperate, defensive measures of individual nations, tariffs, competitive devaluations, beggar-thy-neighbor policies only deepened the crisis. The empire had gambled that it could control the financial lightning it unleashed. It could not. What was the human cost of this financial war? It was measured in the quiet despair of a farmer watching his life's work rot in the field, an ocean away from the front. It was in the ambition of a statesman who saw a tool of victory, but not its world-shattering aftershocks. In their focus on a single, powerful rival, the architects of the blockade failed to see the world as an interconnected, living system. They pulled one thread, the thread of German credit, and watched, helpless, as the entire tapestry of global capitalism unraveled. The world that emerged from this economic cataclysm was paranoid, impoverished, and ripe for new, darker ideologies. The stability of gold was dead. The faith in liberal globalization was shattered. The stage was set for the vengeful nationalism, the protective isolationism, and the totalitarian promises that would define the terrifying decades to come. The train to Baghdad was never completed. The empire that sought to stop it is gone. But the lesson remains, etched not in stone, but in the cycles of history, that the weapons of economics are the most potent of all. For when they are deployed, their fallout is borne not just by the targeted, but by the entire world. In trying to break one nation, they had gambled with the prosperity of all. And in that gamble, everyone lost. They weaponized the global system to break an empire, and in doing so, broke the century itself. It was a masterclass in unintended consequences, a cascading failure of finance that proved the most destructive force of all. This is the Dominion Archives. Subscribe to stand with those who look beyond the obvious, to the hidden architectures of power that truly shape our world. History judges not only the act, but the aftershock.